Hey there, everyone. I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Rochelle Peart. We have Tropical Storm Humberto and also watching a pretty active Atlantic basin, 5 areas that we're keeping our eye on right now. So here's tropical satellite of Tropical Storm Humberto near the Bahamas, near Great Abaco. They're dealing with some issues there from this, still reeling from Dorian just a couple of weeks ago. So they're dealing with tropical storm force winds. There's some tropical rains coming out of this storm as well, and maybe some winds as well from that storm. So sea surface temperatures right now, here's an approximate location of where Humberto is located. The sea surface temperatures are in the mid-80s. You need that 80-degree mark to develop and sustain that tropical characteristics. And Humberto has had an abundance of warm waters in this area to become a tropical system. And we could actually see this storm strengthening even from the 5 a.m. advisory to the 8 a.m. advisory. The pressure has gone down. So when that pressure goes down in the storm, that means it's actually strengthening, because tropical systems are actually an area of low pressure. So the lower the pressure, the stronger the system. So let's talk about the steering pattern, somewhat similar to what we had with Dorian. We have high pressure, Bermuda high, out into the Atlantic Ocean, and with that you get that clockwise flow. So that has helped Humberto to move a little bit over to the west, now starting to take more of a northwesterly turn. We also have a trough. So what that is, that's an elongated area of low pressure, and that is over the northern United States. That's going to push off to the east, and as it does, Humberto getting caught somewhat in this Bermuda high, it's going to curve back out to sea is what it looks like right now, and that trough kind of going to help it kind of just push it a little bit over to the east, away from the southeastern coast of the United States. Maybe we see some surf issues from Humberto, because again, forecasting this to strengthen. Right now we have tropical storm warnings in effect for the Bahamas, Marsh Harbor where Dorian made landfall, also Freeport right around that area where Dorian stalled out as a Category 5 powerhouse. So these areas will continue to be dealing with the rebuilding after Dorian, and now they're getting tropical storm force winds and some rain there as well. Nassau, not as affected by Dorian, but still affected by Humberto, tropical storm warning in effect there as well. So keeping an eye on the tropics. Here's Humberto, winds at 40, gusts to 50, moving is northwest at 7. At one point, Humberto was stationary, which we were looking at that and just kind of like, oh, this is not a good situation. Although those winds are weaker than Dorian, when it was stationary, they still don't really need these types of impacts. So it's somewhat of an improvement that the movement has gone up to 7. And this storm is going to move away from the Bahamas within the weekend, especially into early next week. So it's 30 miles east-northeast of Great Abaco Island, and it's also right now 145 miles east of Freeport. So those were 2 of the locations that were impacted by Dorian really badly. So by 2 a.m. on Sunday, still about 50 miles per hour, still a tropical storm. But as this moves over the warm waters by Monday at 2 a.m., check that out, could become our next hurricane, Category 1 storm, 75 miles per hour by early on Monday morning, strengthening over the warm waters up to maybe about 90 miles per hour, and then moving toward Bermuda as a Category 1 hurricane. So this is not good news for the Bermuda, for anyone in that area. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on this. But when we're talking about the cone, remember that's where the center of the storm is forecast to be, somewhere in this cone most of the time. The center of that storm is encased in that cone of uncertainty. Now the storm, of course, expands away from the center, so even if the center doesn't move that close to Bermuda, they still could have impacts in that area. So we're going to keep an eye out for Humberto for some impacts to Bermuda. So let's compare the models. GFS versus the European in the red, GFS in the yellow. So we looked at this yesterday in my update, and there was a lot of uncertainty, but now that Humberto has developed some of those tropical characteristics, we're getting a better hold of what this storm is going to do. Remember, we just saw the steering pattern, so let's check this out. So watching this as we move into Sunday early in the afternoon, not too far off. The GFS a little bit closer to the Floridian coastline and maybe a little bit weaker. When I say weaker, that means that the lines aren't as densely packed together. And as those lines get a little bit more densely packed together, that's when we're seeing that strengthening of the storm. So here we are Monday at 1 p.m. much more densely packed yellow lines and also those red lines. Remember, we looked at the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, forecast to become a Category 1 storm by early on Monday. So here we are Monday afternoon, still a hurricane as both the European and the GFS continue to track away from land, getting caught in that steering current, both still strengthening through that Category 1 category. So here we are by Wednesday in the early afternoon, both pretty strong Category 1 storms, potentially Category 2. We'll have to see exactly how Humberto reacts to its environment, but still some strengthening likely as we move into the middle of the weekend. Little bit we'll have to watch to see exactly where it goes, but both the GFS and the European. Here's Bermuda moving that eye just to the north, but again, hurricane's not a point on the map, so definitely if this track holds, we will see some impacts to Bermuda from a Category 1 at least storm by late next week, middle of next week. So we're certainly keeping an eye out for right now. So tropical satellite, we have 5 areas to watch. Here's Humberto. We also have a Gulf storm, and then we have 3 areas in the Atlantic also that we're keeping an eye on right now. So here are the probabilities from the National Hurricane Center. The Gulf storms within the next 5 days, 20% chance of developing. Invest 96L, that's this area that's highlighting some of the Lesser Antilles, Windward, Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, and also BVI as well. We're keeping an eye on that 20% chance of developing within the next 5 days. And then we have another disturbance, 20% chance developing within 5 days. And a tropical wave off the western coast of Africa, 60% or medium chance of developing within the next 5 days. So this is what we're keeping an eye on. In addition to Humberto, remember, when we get to September, that's when we see the bulk of development through the entire season. That season goes from the beginning of June to the end of November. So far, Humberto is a tropical storm forecast to become a hurricane. We'll update this graphic as necessary, and we have added also the dates for all of these storms so far in the Atlantic for 2019. Next up, Imelda, Jerry, Karen, and Lorenzo. Those are our next 4 names. The systems that we watch may not become the next 4 name systems, but just keeping track of where we are in the naming system. So again, September, that's when we really start to see most of our activity. So percentage of named storms per month, September 34, much higher than August. And then once we get out of September, October, just about 17% of named storms. So if you'd like, you can find me on social media. I'm posting some updates. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and also Instagram. If you're joining us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to 13 News Now. Tap that bell to see whenever we update a new update for the tropics.